Hey, it's Abby from Turn Sounds. Cut your nails before playing netball.
Hi, I'm Shelby. I'm a clinical exercise physiologist,
And I'm Abby, a clinical nutritionist. And this is the Move Your Mind podcast.
where we talk all things diet, exercise, and well-being, and back it up with evidence.
From our Bachelor of Health Science degrees. So welcome and let's get into it.
Hello, welcome to this week's Move Your Mind episode.
I'm very excited about this one.
Good.
Very.
Today we're going to be talking about, or we'll be addressing the question, will cardio kill my strength gains?
I've heard that several times.
Yes, I certainly have as well. This was one of the ones that was kind of like righted very early in my university career. And so I'm like, know the answer. But I'm going to try and make it an interesting listen and pull out the answer a little longer and explain kind of behind the question, and then we'll go through the evidence for the question.
Shelby and I had a discussion last week actually.
About communication.
Because Shelby, I'm not sure if you listeners have noticed, Shelby's very straight to the point and she just is in general life, and it's great, it's amazing. But then Shelby always thinks that there's nothing to say in her episodes, because once Shelby has the answer, she's like, well, no, it won't. And I'm like, no, you've got to explain how your great brain got to that point. So I'm excited to hear your thought process today
What I'm
instead
doing.
of just, I'm going to reveal the answer in the first
In
10
2
seconds.
Doesn't make for a very good episode. Anyway, so will cardio kill my strength gains? You actually mentioned someone asked you this just the other week.
Yes, about the whole, it was kind of along the lines of that question. It was like, do you go on the treadmill before you do your strength work, or do you go after? And then it kind of led on to the fasted cardio, and if you're trying to build muscle, should you do that?
Great.
So yes.
Yeah, cool, nice. And yeah, I've definitely heard it before. You've kind of got it's kind of like it was reversible as well. Like you've got the big gym bros who don't touch a treadmill because they're like, no, I'll lose all my muscle.
Yes.
And I also feel you have the endurance athletes who will never touch a barbell because they're like, no, my endurance capabilities. So we'll kind of cover both today. So will cardio kill my strength gains? We're kind of looking at two different training focuses. Are you going to be cardiovascular based, or are you going to be strength based?
Yes.
And so to break that down even further, I figured we'd start off with the different muscle fiber types that you can have in your body, because I feel like that kind of lays the groundwork for maybe why this has become an issue or a question in the first place.
Because I remember from my studies, those that are kind of specialised in endurance training have a predominant type of muscle fibre. Those that are better at strength power moves have another type.
Absolutely. Yep. So in our muscles, so they're called your skeletal muscles, everything we know, biceps, quads, all that kind of stuff is all skeletal muscles. And they're made up of individual muscle fibres. So strands of muscle fibres make up a muscle.
It's kind of like a scarf, and then all the
The
lengths
threads.
of cotton
Yeah.
are like your fibres.
Yeah. Exactly. They all go in the same. I'll just leave it there. No. So they all go in the same direction, which they do, but then there's pennation angles, whatever. Anyway, so trying to keep it general today.
I know.
So there are a couple types of muscle fibers that you can find in pretty much every skeletal muscle. Will have a different ratio of all these different muscle types.
Yes.
So really, to break it down into two types, you have slow twitch and fast twitch.
Yes.
So slow twitch, if you're thinking like a muscle contracts, it twitches. It's slow to contract in that it will last a long time. It's got lots of oxygen and blood supply, and it's really slow to fatigue because of the oxygen supply.
Yes.
So what I'm talking about here are like your postural muscles. So all the muscles that can make you stand for hours on end, or just be upright and not slouch to the floor.
Yeah.
They are your slow twitch muscle fibers acting on those.
So
Acting
more
in those
like
situations.
steady, consistent, rather than like explosive, quick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Slow to fatigue, which means they can go for a really long time, but the going for a really long time usually means that they have less force that they are able to produce as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got that trade-off, like how long can you last versus how much force can you produce is pretty much what we're looking at with the different types.
Yeah, because our body couldn't sustain like really high intensity, high amounts of force for the amount of time that a slow twitch fiber would work. So
Absolutely.
it makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, there's definitely kind of one or the other that you're good at. And this would be your typical marathon runner. Like long, lanky, can go for hours on end, like that sinewy muscle kind of thing.
Yeah,
they're not bulky because they have lots of like efficiency, so they don't need size as much. And also they're not very great at producing massive amounts of force, so they're not going to be big either.
Because as well with muscle, right, like the amount of cross-section of the fibers and like the density can generate more force.
Absolutely.
So the more kind of long and lean equates to more endurance, less force.
Yes.
Like cross-section, not crossover.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the cross-section, the size of the muscle, absolutely.
Think of like a thick rump steak versus like a fillet steak, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Sure.
Food.
Well, that's why, like, my little arms, you could assume I can't lift as much as someone with massive biceps.
Yeah.
Because bigger muscles are stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
makes sense.
Like that. So they're your slow twitch, or we're going to call them the type 1 fiber types as well. Then you can go into your fast twitch, so the opposite. They're big, they're powerful, but they're not very efficient. They won't last very long. So you'll be able to like bust out a massive amount of force, but for a small duration of time.
Yes.
These are more anaerobic, which means they don't rely on oxygen as a fuel source. They will rely on all our quick sources of energy, which we'll go into later. And they have less blood supply than your slow twitch, which kind of flows in. They don't have as much supply to keep going for longer periods of time.
Because we've talked about like the oxygen utilization system, it takes longer for your body to uptake the oxygen. So you'd think if you're not using it for long, then you can't possibly have the right amount of oxygen, i.e. doesn't use oxygen.
Yep. Yep.
Cool.
So if our slow twitch was our marathon runner, our fast twitch is our sprinter.
Yep.
So usually if you stood two of those athletes next to each other, one would be kind of long and slim, the other's shorter and bulkier.
Yes.
In typical, like stereotypical athletes, right? Because then Usain Bolt came along and just changed the narrative and was amazingly tall sprinter.
That's what I was thinking.
Which is a really cool discussion in itself, why he was such a good sprinter, being so tall, which was kind of against the norm. But anyway, that's kind of what we're looking at. So then we can break the fast twitch. So these are the type 2 muscle fibers into 2 categories themselves. So there's a type 2X, which are kind of your really, really fast ones. They're like, and it's
really
done. Like
fast.
that's it. They're so inefficient, but they can produce so much force really, really quickly. And then your type 2A is kind of your mix between those two extremes.
Yeah.
So it's this intermediate mix of the slow and really, really fast twitch fiber types.
So that would be maybe like a 100 meter, 200 meter sprint type of intermediate?
Intermediate's more like your 400 meter.
Yes.
Sprinters 1 to 2 100 meters. Intermediate's like 4 to 8. Longer than that is more of your slower
Kilometer.
twitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff like that. And of course, that's only talking about running, but it's the easiest like continuum to kind of factor things into. So that's what we'll start with. So good to kind of already appreciate that. So if you are more endurance focused, slow twitch will be your friend. If you are more fast, powerful, faster twitch muscles will be more useful for you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the beginning of this argument, is if I want to be really, really strong, spending time on my slow twitch muscles is going to, or muscle fibers, is going to take away from my fast fibers. That's kind of starting to get into where this question would even have come from.
Yes.
As an idea.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
You can get tested for your ratio of fibers, can't you?
Yeah, a muscle biopsy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I was
not
like, what
easy.
does that involve?
So they take a chunk of your muscle out and then they do whatever
Probably
tests
like
they do
stimulation or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I got it done on
cool.
me. I was part of an experiment. And it's
Did you?
Yeah, I had to get 2 muscle biopsies in my calf.
What was yours? What was your predominant?
They didn't look at that much. They were looking at the effect of training on jump height in dancers. So it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
But the muscle biopsy is how you tell muscle types as well. But it's like, this tube of like flesh that they take from you.
For
And it's
real?
really sore after.
I was going to say.
It was a couple days recovery of discomfort, and I couldn't stretch my calf, and so like walking was a bit painful. I remember I
Oh my God.
taped my foot into dorsiflexion, so like I flexed my foot and taped it there to sleep. Otherwise, you naturally point your feet when you sleep, and my muscle would contract, and I couldn't stand in the morning because it was, like damaged, like it was a missing part of it.
Yeah.
But I'm back to full strength in both my legs. It didn't impact anything long term.
That's
So it's fine.
insane.
But yeah, anyway.
Wow.
And not easy to come across. That would be like full exercise scientists, like.
Yes.
And it wouldn't necessarily be necessary for an athlete because you can kind of tell in other ways.
By what they're good at.
Yeah. So exactly that. So we all will have tendencies for where we're better off. So like I've never been good at running long distance. I've never been good at anything long distance, just ever. I'm just
Yeah.
naturally better suited to short, sharp efforts.
Yeah.
Which is what dancing is. Like you do like a minute, 3 minutes of work, and then you finish, which is kind of the longest we
Yeah.
would go for. And then in
Yes.
class, it's even shorter bursts,
Yeah.
like 30 seconds.
I
So
think
like,
I'm the opposite. I reckon I'm like longer duration, slower. Like
Yeah.
when I used to swim,
Yes.
sprinting, nah. Like I kind of like can do a long level at a fast pace.
Yeah.
But I can't do a short level at a fast
that,
pace.
yeah, so I'm really consistent in intervals. Like we tested it at uni. I could do like, I think it was 6-second efforts, and I did like 10 of them, and they were all the same effort.
Yeah, wow.
So I'm really good at that, and
Yeah.
I've never, ever, not that I've trained for it either, which is a separate conversation which we'll go into, but I've never been able to run like
Yeah,
just go for
longer
a run
distance.
ever.
It's so interesting.
So
hey?
already we can see, and like to look at us, we would be quite similar, like body shapes.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily be able to pick it. Either.
Yeah, but you're so long and lean though, than for you to be like a big power generator.
know.
Not that I underestimated you,
That's
but
right.
still.
So this is off topic, but when we did that kind of like testing at uni, I was like triathlete. They were like, yep. And I was like, no, you do not know me. I'm not well suited for that at all. That would take years and years of training to get me anywhere close to being able to do a marathon.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So cool.
So your typical person will have 50% of each muscle fiber type in the muscle. So like when we're born, pretty much, and like untrained people, which still results in you and me, so anyone who's not a massive athlete,
Yes.
will have about 50% of each muscle fiber type available to them.
Yep.
And that's because in general life we need both of these, right? We need to be
Yeah.
able to sit up all day, and we need bigger efforts of
General
activity.
tasks,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So the ratios of the two though will like differ, and you can to some point change your ratios, and that depends on what you do with your muscles. So like training history and exercise, and your age can affect the different muscle fiber types as well.
In terms of which ones become more predominant, or which
Yeah,
the
you
ability
lose
for
your
them to-
fast type. You lose the ability to produce power as you get older. So that's a massive like training focus for older aging
Yes.
people, is to make sure you can still do things
Generate
fast.
power.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking of my dad. Bless dad if he's listening. He's old. He used to be really fast, like really good at sprinting, and nowadays if he tries to sprint, he takes off and he cramps like in a second.
That'll
It's
be a
quite
case
funny.
of use it or lose it as well, which is the
Completely.
case. Like picture any like typical grandparent, they're slow and shuffly and they take the time sitting down and
Yeah.
standing up, and if something falls they're not amazingly fast to like go
Yeah.
reach and stuff.
I mean, my dad's not that old.
I know he's not that old. But
Disclaimer.
proved a point. And so, yeah, that's pretty much like the beginnings of what fiber types are and what each one will be used for,
Yeah.
which is kind of going into that. So if you want to be really powerful and strong, you're going to develop your type 2 fibers. If you want to be
Yes.
able to go for long distances, endurance training, you're going to have to develop your type 1.
Yeah.
And so each of those is exactly influenced by what we just said. So if you want a bigger ratio of type 2 fibers, you're going to have to strength train. And if you want a bigger ratio of type 1 fibers, you're going to have to do longer distance endurance training.
Yes, and then I'm just thinking some people might think, oh, that means endurance have to run. but we did talk about in previous episodes that you can still strength train, but you can be in an endurance rep range. Is that correct?
Yes.
Like the
not
15
quite
mark?
the same with what we're talking about here.
Okay.
Because if we flow on to
Cardiovascular.
talking about energy systems,
Yeah.
those 15 rep ranges is still not long enough to tap into your aerobic system, which is really what your type 1 fibers are good at utilizing. So then we can also explain it by way of which energy system can you use. So here's where I did less research because I would just blow out the time of this episode by amazing. So this is where I get really, really general, and it's pretty much mimicked in what we've already talked about with those 3 fiber types anyway.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 energy systems. One is a long, slow burn, sound familiar? One is somewhere in the middle, and somewhere is really quick release of lots of energy.
Yes.
So we can already see those 3 mimicked in the fiber types that we talked about.
Yeah.
So we've got the ATP PCR system, which is like 6 to 10 seconds. So we know that people can run 100 meters in like 10 seconds, the really good ones.
Yeah.
So we're talking about that really fast, really quick to use energy system as one that is available to us.
That doesn't use oxygen.
Doesn't use oxygen because we know that that's too fast a time for your oxygen energy system to kick in.
Yes.
It's just not going to even know what's going on at 10
No.
seconds, let alone be
Probably like, what just
functioning.
happened?
Yeah, like, huh? What?
And that's
It's
why
like
you're
the
so...
sloth of the energy systems. It takes a while.
Well, I mean, it's cool. Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
as in, like, to get going and like reaction times are a bit slow. Or not necessarily because it would start kicking off soon, but it takes a while to really like get into zone.
Do people
right?
breathe when they do a 100-meter sprint?
Surely. You'd have to. It would still.
But
Anyway,
if
we're
it
going to talk about
doesn't
that.
use oxygen...
But you still have to clear waste products.
Oh,
and
yes,
stuff, which is what
okay.
we're going to talk about.
This shows how much I've revised this over the last 4 years.
You've got your in the middle system, which is your glycolytic system. And again, I'm not really going to say too much because A, I didn't revise enough, and B, doesn't really
It's not
matter.
really
Yeah, no.
important. Yeah.
So this is kind of somewhere in the middle. This is where like we're looking at 2 minutes of work is where this intermediate system is going to help you out. Kind of uses a bit of both.
Yeah.
And again, not as powerful as the first one, not as long lasting as the third one, which we're going to talk about, which is your aerobic system. So this is what we're saying. Aerobic system uses oxygen. It takes longer to kind of get up and going, but it's crazy efficient once it goes.
Yeah.
Pretty much anyone, if they needed to, could walk for hours and hours and hours if they wanted to with little training.
Yep.
And that's because your aerobic system is kind of always pretty good to go in that kind of sense.
I'm just thinking, like, what? I wonder if that links back to our, like, caveman days, whether or not we're accustomed to that being more efficient because of the type of activities that we did. Like, I wonder why.
Why we've got the different systems?
And why
Or-
just one was just so efficient.
Yeah,
I guess
we need
because you need it, because we use oxygen.
Yeah,
right?
and oxygen is so readily available. Like our glycogen stores will be depleted.
And cellular respiration requires oxygen, so why would
Exactly.
your body prioritize a system that didn't involve that? Okay,
Yeah.
answered the question.
Of course, we're going to be good at the one that keeps us alive.
Duh.
Like no one has to like lift up a car, but everyone can like keep themselves
Walk.
alive for the whole day. Yeah.
I think too deeply sometimes. Like, oh, the caveman, Paleolithic era.
Take it back.
Okay.
So they're kind of your 3 systems as well. And so each of those, like I potentially might have a better quick release energy system than you based on what we're good at training.
Yeah.
Versus your aerobic system is probably more efficient than mine because I spend less time in my aerobic zone, they call it.
Yes.
And I know that that's like a long-term goal that I always need to push myself for is because I know that I don't enjoy going for long amounts of time on anything. So it's something I really need to push because I would much enjoy doing sprints or intervals or
And it
resistance
really
training.
is like if you don't use it, you lose it because as we're discussing, what we've done in our past with our exercise is reflecting what type of fiber types we see as being more efficient in us.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And so there's a genetic component to that where you just know some people are like, he's a sprinter or she can do whatever, marathons till the day she dies. And you're just kind of more adapt to that naturally. But then also training will affect what you do.
Yeah.
With that as
And in the Olympics, you see that with certain countries being good at certain events. I guess
Absolutely.
the gene pool would be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interesting.
I know. And so, yeah, with that, if you work your aerobic system is going to get better. If you work more of the quick release systems, they're going to get better. And so, again, tying into the question, will cardio kill my strength gains? Strength gains is more like quick, strong efforts. So the worry there is that if you spend too much time on cardio, you're taking away energy from this quicker energy systems, which we know isn't true. Like, that's not really a good base. So one of the things they say is, like, don't do cardio first because you'll be too tired or it'll use up the energy that you'll use in your resistance training straight after, which has a point, I believe, from like a mental fatigue point of view. And like, obviously you're using up like energy stores. Glycogen, absolutely. So yes, but it's not so much of a like, you'll absolutely take from this one to feed that one.
Yes.
Like, there's no real evidence to show that, in a sense. Does that make sense?
But if you find that you work better with your strength work after not doing cardio beforehand, then listen to your body and do what works for you.
So that's where we're going to get into now. So like, what do we do now with that information? So we kind of, with I think most topics I talk about, there's a middle ground for all of it. So the first question I think you should just like focus on for all us like non-elite athletes is, what's your focus? What's your biggest goal? And prioritize that. Yeah. So if you want to be able to run, great. Run as, not even, probably actually, run the majority of the time, sprinkle in the strength training.
Yes.
If you want to be really, really strong, strength training most of the time, sprinkle in the cardio.
Yeah.
Then what we can do as well is have those as far apart from each other as possible. So if you're really wanting pure strength gains, then split your session up, and whatever you prefer, morning or night for either, do strength as its own session, then like 6 hours plus later, do your second session of either cardio or strength, or whichever, because if you prefer doing strength in the morning or whatever.
Yes.
So if you...
And what's the reasoning behind that?
Because you will be tired. You will have depleted stores.
Yeah. So to maximise the outcome and the gains or the
adaptations.
Yes, that you receive in the types of training. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you still want to be focusing on your training. So if you just killed yourself with your resistance training and then have like a 40-minute jog in front of you, like, that's pretty hard for anyone. That turns into quite a long session. So break it up, give yourself time to recover from the strength training, from like a protein and glycogen build up and all that kind of stuff. Let that happen, and then go back and do your bout of cardio later. But in saying that, a 5-10 minute warm up on the treadmill or elliptical or whatever, like, fine. It's fine. It's
coming from a cardio hater perspective.
Like, it's fine. What we're talking about there is like hour-long bouts of cardio may have acute effects on your strength training session, in the fact that it might not be as intense, and therefore you might not get as many adaptations from it as if you didn't do the cardio. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But...
yeah, the cogs are turning.
Yes.
I'm like, oh.
So then it's like, why do cardio at all, right? If I'm just a strength buff, why would I even do cardio?
Yes, and that's something where I'm like, no, because you see...
exactly.
You see the people that... I'm thinking powerlifters, I'm being very stereotypical, and then they walk to the letterbox and they're like, and I'm like, how is that healthy?
Exactly. So absolutely good point. So cardiovascular training works your heart and your lungs, right? And having a stronger heart will get you through your strength sessions better. So we touched on this before. Your heart, so if your heart is stronger, it can beat, or it can push more blood around your body with a single beat, with a single contraction, which talks about the efficiency of your heart. So if your heart's doing little tiny wimpy contractions, it's not pushing your blood very far.
Yes.
So you need more contractions to push blood around. If you have this really nice strong heart that can pump and push the blood halfway around your body, then it's way more efficient. And that will help you in your strength training you still need oxygen to be supplied to your muscles when you're working, and you need to clear out all the waste products that you're naturally creating with your strength
And
training.
your blood does that. It sweeps through and it takes the CO2 and it brings it to your lungs and then you exhale it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So having a nice strong heart is going to help you in your strength training because it improves the efficiency of your blood and nutrient supply through and to your muscles.
Yeah, and you also build like increased amount of mitochondria. I always found that so interesting in studies. Like your muscles actually create more energy production systems, like little organelles inside of them, which make
absolutely.
you more efficient.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So cool.
And like you said, if you're like huffing and puffing walking to the letterbox, if your next weight is across the gym and you like tire yourself out just walking to it, like, come on. That's a very extreme case.
Yeah, that is.
I don't know anyone like that.
No.
But the fact is, like, you can't, anyone like that should be, should strive to be a little bit more well-rounded than that. You know, like you do get benefits from both. So things like so this are just typical guidelines, 3 to 4 30-minute sessions of cardio, aerobic training a week will positively impact your resistance training. Mostly speaking, if you're just a pleb, like, you know, just like a normal person.
If you're just a pleb,
if you're
be
an
a little
Olympic,
bit nicer.
if you're an Olympic weightlifter, don't take that advice. Please talk to someone who knows more
Yes.
about sports science than I do.
But if you're a pleb,
But for us everyday people who are looking to get stronger,
yeah,
absolutely fine to add in 30-minute bouts of aerobic activity 3 to 4 times a week, which
and
is
beneficial, not just fine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is exactly what we should be striving for anyway, because of all the other benefits that is given to us. Typically as well, those 30-minute bouts are going to be a lower intensity to be able to go for 30 minutes, which could follow on that they're easier to recover from. So they're not necessarily going to strip you for days, which means you'll be fine the next day for your strength training session.
Yes.
You know? So it's not like they're that detrimental to you anyway to even talk about recovery. And if the bit that they are, that's where you can go, all right, well, do something in the morning, go to work, and then do your other session at night if you really need to.
Yes, if
be
you're really
hitting it
wanting
that
to
hard.
optimize,
Yeah,
like that's
yeah.
what it comes down to. If you're really serious about it, do that. But
and
general
or on
public-
your days off. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know anyone who's strength training every day of the week. So you'll have a day off, so do your aerobic training on those days.
Yeah. And it can even be, you can even see it as like active recovery, I guess.
Absolutely. Which is a
Getting
real
the
thing.
oxygen going through, lactic acid,
Clearing
going
everything,
out.
exactly. Yeah, making
Yeah.
sure everything's getting the recovery stuff that they need. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Then we can kind of go into, well, if you really, really want to keep on working the faster twitch muscles, do a HIIT session for
Your cardio.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then you're still playing in the same energy systems, you're still playing with explosive movement, but you're getting a long enough effect on your heart to create change.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Does that kind of make sense so far?
Yeah, definitely.
Because then the other side of the coin is if you're an endurance athlete, why should you strength train?
Which we talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. So actually my uni lecturer, I think I've mentioned her before, she just got published like a month ago. Like it's really fresh stuff.
Oh, amazing.
And so she looked at triathletes who did and did not include strength training in their training regime. And those who included strength training, so it was just 2 resistance training sessions a week, like 3 or 4 lower body exercises and 1 upper body exercise. The ones that did that session, I think it was 26 weeks with a halfway point measurement as well. They showed improvements in running and cycling economy, so they were better at running and cycling, and they improved maximal strength, while the endurance group who just did their normal endurance training didn't significantly improve. And then kind of the cherry on top, which endurance trained or like triathletes really get worried about, is that the strength group didn't increase in body mass either. So that's something really important to consider.
Yes.
Like you need to be light to be a triathlete because it's more efficient.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to note that you can do 2 strength training sessions, get benefits from it, but you don't get heavier either. So
Do you know the
absolutely.
rep range that they were doing? Like, what did their sessions involve?
I think I tried to find it and it was a bit tricky, so I left it up in case this question came up.
Because just
Oh, here
talking.
you go. Yeah, 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions.
Okay.
So typical. Greater than 75% of their 1 rep max. So decent loads. And that was for the first 12 weeks. And then the second set was 1 to 6 reps of 3 to 5 sets. So that makes sense as far as like training a relatively untrained athletes. So these people hadn't completed strength training in the 6 months prior to this session. So it absolutely makes sense that you'd start them out with a couple of months of that kind of hypertrophy coordination training before jumping into a heavier set, which they did then for a couple months after that.
And we talked about the why behind the rep ranges in how many reps should I do?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And how it's kinder on your body to start in that 3 to 4 set, 8 to 12 reps. And then once you are confident, once your body can kind of has a base of strength, go in for it with the 5 by 5 training. And that was at greater than 85% of 1 rep max. So absolutely decent training, twice a week. I couldn't find, it's in there, but I just didn't read it that far, what they were doing.
Sorry, I have a question.
Right, and then they just did their normal endurance training is what I wanted to add.
Okay.
Go on.
Yeah, sorry, my brain was off
Go
thinking, and I interrupted you. But in terms of didn't increase body mass.
Yes.
You just think, okay, they're building strength. Their muscles will be increasing in size as a result of that.
Not necessarily. So we did chat about this in the how many reps, is that there's like, if you're bigger, you'll be stronger, but you can get stronger without getting bigger. Because of the neuromuscular effect.
Yes, so more brain coordination, central nervous system.
Yeah.
Your body becomes more effective at creating the contraction.
So then one nerve is able to reach out to more fibers. So you can just you can send an information down one nerve fiber and it will turn on 5 muscle fibers instead of 1. That kind of stuff.
Okay.
So you get more bang for your buck.
Yes. That makes so much sense.
And your body gets more comfortable with producing more force. So we all have more available to us than our brain is comfortable with us using. And so this kind of training kind of resets where your brain is happy with as far as how much force you can produce. You know, those crazy stories of people like lifting cars off people and stuff. Like we all have that ability, but our brain gives us a cap as protection.
Yes.
So training like that
lifting cars.
can kind of like push that cap up and allow you to utilize more safely. Without ripping your muscle off your bone or whatever.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah?
Yes.
So this, my lecturer, Kate Baldwin, was like, guys, this is sports science. Like you can get stronger without getting bigger. Let me show you. And so she did this series of studies and they're finally getting published. It's really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then that kind of, okay, so you can get stronger without getting bigger. And then back to the original question, then you can get more cardiovascularly fit without getting smaller. Yes,
if you maintain your strength gains, absolutely. I mean, if you maintain your strength sessions, absolutely.
Because it's like a different energy system. And I think just approaching it from an aesthetic point of view is just important because I think some people, that's where the question comes from.
Exactly.
Like if I then engage in cardio, then I will lose my muscle mass because XYZ.
Yeah, so that was something, I wanted to touch on. If you're really worried from an aesthetic point of view, then low impact cardio is the way to go. So cycling, swimming, rowing, or like the elliptical is where you want to go if you're really worried about losing muscle mass because of the cardio you do. So things like running have a lot of eccentric force on them, so your muscle is lengthening as it contracts because of what running is. And so that kind of motion, eccentric training it doesn't build muscle mass. That's why marathon runners are smaller.
Yeah.
Because they're doing lots of eccentric training, which can make you strong, but it doesn't make you big. That makes a sense. So if you're really, really worried about losing size because of the cardio training you're doing, do low impact cardio.
Because
you want to mitigate the effect of all that eccentric training that happens in running. Does that make any
Okay,
sense?
no, my brain's not getting this. My brain is not getting. So eccentric or like low impact doesn't build muscle size.
No.
But then I'm just thinking from a gym bro perspective, I'd
Yeah.
be like, well, why would I do that if it doesn't build size? If I could do a form of cardio that could build size as well, why wouldn't I do that?
Yes. So it's less intense to do a lower intensity, lower impact cardio session, which means you might be able to improve recovery times, which means you can get back into the gym quicker. So if
Okay.
you're purely looking for the cardiovascular benefit in like, let's get my heart and lungs working better so that my training improves, then do something that's not going to greatly impact your recovery, like something low impact.
The big picture.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
answers that question.
Yeah?
Yeah, completely.
Cool.
But then you want to push it a bit harder and you want to maybe get some muscular gains whilst incorporating cardio, you go for HIIT.
I almost doubt you could get muscular gains, but they might be better at maintaining your muscle gains.
But then you've got to think, if I do a HIIT and that gets me out of the gym because it's not what I'm used to and it's too much, then that sacrifices
and you're still just
these strength
hitting
gains.
your quick like glycogen stores when you could be working on your aerobic system because of the
Yes.
benefits that can give you from a
Yeah.
strength training perspective as well.
Right. Yes. You're doing so good, Shelby.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry for all these questions, but
No,
this
it's
is
good.
so
It's
interesting.
good. So yeah, prioritize what your main goal is. For anyone who's just like, I just want to be fitter, do both. And again, my suggestion for that would be finish with what you enjoy most, because you don't want
Yeah.
to finish your session with the thing you're dreading.
Yes.
So I would do my cardio first, so
Get
I
out
had
of
no
the way.
excuses not to get it done.
Yeah.
Or I do my cardio separately. So like a new thing I'm trying to implement is 10 minutes of walking at the end of my shift.
Yeah.
Because I just don't otherwise, you know? So just things like that where it's separate, it doesn't impact your thoughts while doing your session. That way I can still really enjoy my strength sessions and not be like, oh, this is at the end of it or whatever.
Yeah.
I separate them.
And it's good to separate sometimes too, just to spread out your day. Like walk in the morning and strength train at night, or
Exactly.
strength train in
Yeah.
the morning, walk at night.
And we know that overall physical activities are really, really important.
Yes.
Physical activity levels are really important. So stay active throughout the day. And that's a nice way to kind of make sure that happens.
Yeah, and for mental health too, concentration, then
Absolutely.
you go into lifestyle and all of that.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
yeah, any of us just kind of like normal people who are training just for general health, doesn't really matter. If you have a preference of what you enjoy, do that more often. Just make sure you're at least getting the other one in at some point,
Yes.
because it will be beneficial.
All right.
And if you're an athlete, go talk to a sports scientist.
Yes. For more individualized
Yes,
advice.
absolutely.
But if you were to do a one-word answer, does cardio or will cardio kill my strength gains?
I could say either. Or what would I say? I could say no. Not if you do it right.
Not if you consider all the things we've just
Yeah.
talked about for the last...
Not if you
How
use
many minutes?
kind of common sense. It won't.
Mm-hmm.
But it can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And we did cover why that was.
Yeah.
Yeah, you covered why that was.
Okay.
Wow. I love it.
Good.
A lot of thoughts.
There's a lot in that one. So if
Yeah.
anyone needs me to elaborate, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah.
I'm happy to research or review more into the energy systems if anyone's more interested in how those work. I know Abby's pretty clued up on that stuff as well, so we could do like a joint episode there. Turnsounds@gmail.com if you have questions, or moveyourmind.podcast on Instagram. You can message us. We'll both see it through there. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Great.
I love that. Thanks, Shells.
Thanks for listening.